say welcome to the Product Management Community of Practice event today. We're so happy you're here. I wanted to just share briefly how this event came about because it really reflects the model that we are intentionally building here with the PMCOP. So Greg Williams at a previous PMCOP session joined us. He shared how much he enjoyed the conversation, and then he asked one question: are you planning anything focused on hardware? And that's how that question turned into action. So he suggested the idea, but then he took the lead in partnering with Alex and Andrew to shape today's session. So this is definitely a result of alumni stepping forward, being co-creators, and helping us design programming that really reflects where product management is actually going. So thank you, Alex, Greg, and Andrew, for your leadership and being part of a community that continues to evolve because its members contribute. So in terms of attendees, if we'd like your contributions as well, so feel free to add your thoughts and questions into the chat as we go. We will try to get to them as we go. We will also save about 15 minutes at the end specifically for Q&A. So you're definitely a part of this, and we value your contributions as well. Okay, let's get started. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Shauna, and welcome to everyone. Glad we've got a pretty good crowd today. Excited for the conversation. So our conversation today is going to focus on how the discipline of product management is evolving at the intersection of software, artificial intelligence, and hardware. I think that a lot of folks think about product management mostly through a software lens, writing user stories, shipping features for SaaS products via agile development, running A/B experiments, and iterating very quickly on your product. And I think that this world in particular over the last 3 to 5 years has really been shaken up by AI, both in terms of how PMs do their jobs, but also in terms of the capabilities that they are able to ship to their customers. But what we're going to focus on today is when AI meets the physical world. So disciplines like robotics, autonomy, manufacturing, getting into physical infrastructure. This is where some key differences in the role and function of PM begin to come to the surface. And so today we are fortunate to have 2 product leaders whose experiences really span this full spectrum to help us unpack and explore some of these topics. So we have two folks joining us today. So number one, Andrew Tresansky. He brings a deep technical product perspective. At Zoox, he worked on autonomy, perception, and AI developer tools. Today, he is at Reframe Systems, where he's applying those lessons to another type of physical product, which is using robotics and microfactories to build climate-resilient housing. And then we also have Alexander Stevenson, who brings the enterprise and scaling perspective. He has led product organizations through major growth, including helping to drive Samsara's journey to IPO and to over $1 billion in annual recurring revenue. He's built companies, platforms, and teams that integrate hardware, software, and data at scale. So I think together, these 2 gentlemen offer perspectives that are on both ends of the spectrum, both building the systems themselves and scaling the organizations. So let's get into it. So to start us off, I think it's always helpful for folks to understand a bit about kind of what has led people to the point they're at in their careers. Right before the waiting room opened up, we were actually talking about how back when we got into the product game, that there were no classes at Sloan. It was just kind of figure it out, jump in, and now you have amazing support structures such as a community of practice and disciplines at Sloan. But we're going to hear about how these gentlemen have gotten to where they are. So we'll start with Andrew. So your career path has taken you from the Navy and defense research to Zoox and now building housing through robotics. So can you walk us through how you moved from research into PM and your current role at Reframe?
Yeah, sure. So I started my career as a nuclear submarine officer. I ran a nuclear propulsion plant, a team that operated it. And then I did something that we called officer of the deck. So I actually owned the entire ship for 8 hours. Captain would go to sleep, tell me, don't hit anything, don't shoot anybody, don't start a war. It was a pretty wild experience in my early 20s. But I learned a ton about systems thinking. I realized that you have to understand how the entire propulsion plant worked, how the entire ship works to achieve an outcome. I still use that pretty frequently. The other thing I took away from that was I wanted to design new systems, not operate things that other people designed. They were going to do the fun part. And the desk job I had in the Navy before MIT was doing just that, conceptual design of new submarine systems, platforms, payloads. I loved it, but timeline's just really slow. It's a bit of the hardware slowing things down, but also government is kind of glacial at times. Went to MIT, did everything I could in AI, robotics, ran the self-driving car team, moved really fast, took the race car so fast it actually went right into a wall about 45 miles an hour, which did not discourage Zooks from bringing me on as a product manager. So complete jump into tech, into product management, into the deep end, but got to work on advanced autonomy, perception, computer vision, built tools to handle AI. And the big takeaway there was around verification and validation in AI. Both, did we build the thing right? Did we build the right thing? Understanding the difference between those two questions and how you apply them as a product manager when you're the arbiter of quality was really, really useful. That's the second thing that I still use every day at Reframe. And now I've been at Reframe for pretty recently. And here we're designing and manufacturing homes to solve housing availability and affordability using robotic distributed microfactories. It's a pretty big mission. What I do is something we call Pixels to Parts. It's a software stack that lets us manufacture fully customized homes at standardized cost and speed. It automates design from high-level architecture down to factory robotics. And we're trying to compress a really human-intense, expensive process into software and then drive hardware or robotics to create a physical product that solves a real-world problem. It's a great job. I love it.
That's very cool. I really like that framing. Did we build the right thing versus did we build it right? And PM is definitely responsible for answering both those questions. So,
yep.
Well, over to Alexander. So your path has spanned consulting, founding startups, and leading product teams at enterprise scale. So tell us a bit about your journey and just some of the key inflection points you've hit along the way. And I'm going to lean over and close the window because the leaf blowers have arrived in my neighborhood. So
no worries. Feel free. My 2-year-old loves leaf blowers, so he'd be very excited. I got into product management sort of by accident, very early in my career, actually. So my master's thesis when I did my computer science degree was taking hardware from a little unknown company by the name of NVIDIA, and their first pre-release programmable GPU that didn't have a fixed function lighting pipeline that actually you could write some code that went through the GPU. I used that to do custom computations essentially, and so that got me into Microsoft, helping the Windows operating system use GPUs to make stuff faster that wasn't video games. At the time, everything was graphics cards were for playing games and not for doing anything else. And we thought there was an opportunity to accelerate the way everything worked by using GPUs. And so I was on a team that was doing that, building APIs for developers to use to be able to accelerate all of the rendering. And today, that's the pipeline that everything goes through when you run a Windows machine. All the rendering goes through this GPU accelerated pipeline that we built way back in 2002 or so. It turned out we didn't have a PM initially on our team. There was and what kept happening was PMs would join, be a little perplexed by what technically we were doing, not be very effective, and then leave. And so after cycling through 3, I was already doing a lot of the sort of work that a PM needed to do just to keep things progressing. And so they just sort of anointed me PM for the team, and that was where I started. And so I started being PM for there in the software world, but tied to the sort of effect that hardware had, and then went from there. And so from there, throughout my career, I think I always really started looking then for like, had that customer mindset, had that customer lens on like, why are we doing what we're doing? What do the requirements need to be? Why is that the requirement? So I did my MBA at Sloan, of course. Out of there, I joined consulting for a half decade. That took me to Europe, where I was Bain's expert in tech strategy for EMEA. I participated in all of their tech practice work that was on that continent for a period of time, and then did a startup where I ran product, of course, and, for that startup, and was very tied to the customer that was in peer-to-peer car sharing. From there, I joined what was at the time a larger startup by the name of Samsara. We'll talk about them today, but I ended up running all of product globally for Samsara right through the IPO and some very exciting scaling. They produced products that were a combination of this AI-powered dash camera that could use AI inference built into the camera, so running on edge, not running in a data center somewhere, to understand what drivers were doing and how to coach them to be more safe, and then also have hardware that would connect to assets and video, connect to assets and equipment so that they could understand what that asset was doing. So it's a vehicle braking right now. Do they have an engine light on? What's going on in that vehicle? And so you can manage assets in the real world at scale and sort of taking all of that physical infrastructure and getting it digitized. And then since then I've done some startups, but I don't want to go on too long with one answer. We'll make it conversational, and so I'll hand it back to you, Greg, and go from there.
Very, very interesting. So it was your feedback as a customer to NVIDIA that set them on their trajectory that they've been on today, I'm gathering.
No doubt. I sold my investment way back then at a 30% gain and thought I was a genius. So that's good lesson.
It's amazing how often I've heard that story of there really was no PM and someone had to be the product manager. So I just kind of stepped forward, and that was the beginning of my journey. So
yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for giving us a little insight into where you folks are coming from. So I think we'll move forward, and let's talk a little bit about where things are changing for product managers in a world where more and more we see this convergence between hardware, AI, and software, delivering new and exciting capabilities across a lot of different industries. So first, we'll go to Andrew. So from your experiences in autonomy and robotics, how do you think product management changes when the product has to interact with the physical world versus pure software? Well, why do they say that hardware is hard?
Yeah, it is a little bit harder, I think. The timelines are definitely longer, and that changes how you work. Agile is meant to work on a really short timeline, a quick iteration cycle that you just can't always do in hardware. But I think the hot take is that means the Agile mindset matters more, not less, when you work with hardware. The shorter the iteration loop you can make, the more valuable it is, the more learnings you can have. Same concept. You just have to work a little harder, I think, to surface and test the assumptions that you're going to do those loops on. So that reframe, like our houses get built on waterfall. You can't really, do agile house delivery. I'm going to get you your kitchen version 3 tomorrow and add features to it. It doesn't make sense, right? And it's a really long, complex process. But we're agile in how we define and design houses. So if I think about, a bathroom as something that really differentiates between customers, how can I iterate on that faster than the house? How can I iterate faster on a shower than a bathroom? Just the plumbing, right? The smaller the scope I can get to in the hardware, the faster I can test internally, externally, the more value I can deliver.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Yeah, getting creative for prototyping becomes even more critical in that world.
Definitely.
Yep. So, Alexander, AI is now reshaping how products are built, how they're tested, how they're deployed. Capabilities are changing weekly, it seems. And perhaps using your experience from Samsara, how do you think that the challenges and maybe opportunities facing PMs launching complex products today differ from maybe 5 to 7 years ago?
Yeah, I think it's funny because when you see these new capabilities, that's the obvious question. But in many ways, I think the challenges they have are the same challenges, and that they're made more stark when you get rid of the problems that used to make parts of it hard, right? Used to be writing the PRD, spending the time to craft the prose and to write all of the things was a hard part. But as you strip back things and you can get things automatically generated, it's the content then and the customer understanding that becomes more important. I'll give you an example of what I mean. Um, there was a time at Samsara where I was visiting the Mexico office and speaking to some customers in the Mexican market. And I talked to a fleet manager, and this was a guy who had a huge transportation network, so many trucks that were moving trailers of cargo throughout Mexico. And he said, look, I really want you to go build a feature that lets me highlight things in reports. It was a software feature he wanted highlighting in reports, and that's easy enough. I could have gone and done that. But as a good PM, I always coach my team to understand the customer problem, not what they want, but like, why do they need that feature? And talking to him, I realized, and he told me that, well, you see, in the parts of Mexico he operates in, truck jackings and armed robberies are really common. And so he has a room full of people that look at all of the GPS coordinates of trucks in real time, cut and paste them into an Excel sheet, then highlight the cells of the ones that haven't moved in 5 minutes, then call the drivers so that they can give a code word if they're in distress or not, and then they can just dispatch armed response teams to intercept carjackers or truck jackers that would like save this theft of cargo. It's like, and it would have been so easy for me not to ask that question. As a result, what did we do? We ended up building hardware that did vehicle engine disabling, right? So like engine disabling hardware that could be triggered by detecting it turns out they also use cellular jammers, and so there's things we could do at the chipset level that would detect the difference between the very high noise of a jammer being run versus like losing signal from your cell network, and so you can actually detect jamming. There's things that we could do to like solve this with smart hardware and software and technology, and avoid them having to do cut and paste all day as a job, and avoid them having to do this sort of crazy Rube Goldberg system they'd set up. But you don't get at that unless you are able to dig into the customer problem, dig into the customer need, really understand why they want that in the world, what value it'll generate from them. That problem exists with or without AI. And so now, once you can do that discovery, you can then write up a great PRD with AI, and you'll remember all the section titles, and it'll do a really good job of producing some of the artifacts. I think that key skill of diving into the problem, being really curious, learning what's going to make a difference, that's still the challenge that distinguishes great PMs from good enough PMs, and really helps.
I'm guessing that carjacking was not a use case that was on your roadmap at the beginning.
It was not something it turns out it's popular, and there's parts of Italy and the Mexican market that it turns out to be important in. Turns out that there's all sorts of there's like a competitive market because criminals learn which fleets have the best anti-carjacking technology, and they avoid those brands. And so you actually get network effects when you have good technology where other fleets get targeted and not yours. So they just stop trying, which actually then completely eliminates it instead of just reduce. It's really fascinating, but yeah, not originally on the roadmap, which is why you talk to customers. Got to get there.
One of the things that's always challenging for PMs is you have certain features or capabilities that are extremely important to a small slice of customers, but maybe are not as applicable to the broader customer base. And I think especially in hardware, that is even tougher to manage when you can't just toggle configuration switches depending on which customer is using what features. So for that specific example, did you find that use case or something similar to it, that there would be value in building those features across a larger set of the customer base?
Yeah, you want to design stuff in a smart way that maximizes cost. So, for example, the engine disabling mechanism that we built for a truck, because it's basically like a mechanical connection that it can make to a wire that's remotely controlled. Well, you can also use that for in construction. They want access control for equipment, so people who aren't qualified can't use the equipment. That's basically the same piece of hardware you need, and so that's done. And it's easier to customize software. You can look at some of the and you look for different markets that it might be applicable to, or you look for, and sometimes it's just, look, there might be a feature that is absolutely required for a specific market or a specific segment. You just got to build it. And if the price of the market is worth it, then, you build that feature, even if by itself it wouldn't be desirable. But other times you look for ways to be smart about amortizing the cost of a piece of hardware or the cost of something you're going to do across other customers. We had I was a big part of launching and getting some sort of grow in Europe as well. And there's a lot of specific European needs that are very different than the US market there. And as we did that too, there was what we would do is we would bring all of those features. For example, in Europe, it was common to track worker hours by using the same software used to track whether they're complying with driving law, like are they driving too much or not enough. By bringing that to the whole world and have like fuel efficiency was really important in Europe. So we brought that to the whole world. You get a better product and a more competitive product even in other markets. And so we use that as much as possible to amortize the development cost, and then bring those features across markets to just compete better. But it's always a question, right? You want to build stuff that's going to make business sense as well.
That's really, really interesting. So AI is obviously upending many, many industries at this point, and I think it is impacting the day-to-day job of the product manager in a lot of different ways. There are new tools, at least in the software world, popping up every week. And I think a lot of these are specific to PMs, things like ChatPRD, Dovetail for software product development, integration of AI into the role of the product manager, I think has really become table stakes to be successful in the business. So I'm in fact, one example, I was chatting with a friend of mine who is kind of a senior product leader at Walmart the other day. And we were talking about how AI has infiltrated the organization and what changes this was bringing. And he said, if you bring a PRD to anyone in that organization today, they will say, get out of here, like bring me a prototype. So it is now that the PM is responsible for building prototypes. So there's significant changes. So I'm curious, and this is open to either one of you or both, what are some key skills that you believe the next generation of PMs needs if they want to be successful, in particular in the world of hardware?
Yeah, I can jump in.
Sure.
Like, I think there's the great framework of like discovery and delivery. And discovery and delivery are still like the same functions. Figure out what to build and build it. Being able to deliver on the things that you say you're going to build, that's table stakes for a product manager. It's how you gain credibility. You actually get results. You build things. There's a great opportunity for AI there, right? Like if I can use AI to run my Kanban board, to run my stand-ups, to keep my tickets clean, status reporting, to communicate better and just execute, that saves me time to do discovery, which is a lot harder. And fun like thing, I Kanban myself. Like I do a personal sprint for like the stuff I want to do as a product manager, like the things I'm trying to get in my team dynamics, all of that. I set goals. I track that. Then the other piece, discovery. So like we're seeing a lot of AI tools pop up there. I've seen like opportunity solution trees managed graphically, ChatPRD, right? I think this is very much the human endeavor. Like you're never going to get AI to do it all for yourself in the same way that you could never like dump a bunch of feature requests into a matrix and come out with a good decision. It would give you a decision. It wasn't a good one. I think these tools are very much on the bleeding edge, and what they're all trying to do is manage information for you in a big way, and output it in the ways that are most valuable for your team. Because a PRD is a slightly different thing and used different ways at different teams, right? Like a discovery artifact, a solution tree, right? I've been building it all myself. Like I look at good examples, I put them into Claude, I tell it to replicate them, I pull in blog posts, best practices. I follow the pretty common loop of like, there's a task I want to do, I do the task, I capture it into a skill, I iterate on the skill, I tell Claude to do something better, I change something manually until it gets to a good place. And following that to work on my whole like knowledge base, which is every meeting transcript, every Notion page, every Slack, every meeting, like all of that, with the skills that I like, doing things the way that I think is best practice compared to internet best practice, and communicating the way that my team likes to communicate. It's working pretty well for delivery and discovery, and it's making me go a lot faster and I think deliver better results. And sadly, the off-the-shelf stuff has not impressed or done quite as well. So I always want to have somebody else do my work for me if I can.
Yeah, Andrew and I did not conspire in this answer ahead of time, but I have, as it turns out, a very similar system set up where I think, as a PM, there's really two things that you want to be looking at. One is how these new technologies affect what products you can make for the customer, right? So there's now I have this new superpower, which is, sort of a really awkward thinker and writer that I can build into any product surface and think about how that's going to change things. And then at the same time, what can I do in my own workflows, my own that? And so Andrew talked about like, yeah, he's got his own Kanban board and his sort of knowledge base. I have something very similar actually. Skills that like, hey, when I say ingest notes from that meeting I just had or produce this, I've got like a way that I want it to do that, and it contributes it to sort of my personal second brain wiki full of folder of information I'm tracking, and so thinking about for your workflows for and I have that for like what I want to do with my fitness goals and health goals. I have that for what I'm doing with work stuff and different projects. I have that for, and just using the tools, the whole world right now, this is new for everybody. You talk to people even at the Frontier Labs, and they are also discovering emergent behaviors and are being surprised by this. Nobody knows how to do this or exactly what the emergent behavior of the next model will be. So the only way to learn it is to be talking to people who are using it all the time, using it all the time yourself, and iterating to see what works. And so that curiosity and that like just do it yourself and actually try it and see what works is is the key to doing it, and breaking things into the, hey, what am I using for myself that makes me there? What's the actual goal? Stay crisp on what you're trying to do, but then just keep learning the tools. And hey, initially it's not always an efficiency gainer because you're still ramping up on how to use it, but these are also the first tools perhaps in humanity that will also teach you how to use them themselves. You can ask like, hey, how could I have done this better? What would be there? And it will give you an answer that is at least worth thinking about. So it's an interesting time to be working, really.
Yeah. One short follow up. Like,
Yeah.
I started the journey relatively recently, and I a lot of time into it. But if you're like early on the journey, the better you understand the task or the thing you're trying to do, the easier it is to start. So like the toy task that I used to start, I got good advice: build a game, built like Minesweeper, right? And I learned a ton doing that because I understood how Minesweeper is supposed to work, and the difference between what AI was giving me and what I wanted was really clear and easy for me to articulate. And another one, like I used it to find a Valentine's Day lunch restaurant because dinner's easy to find, but trying to find the right like ambiance with a decent menu at lunchtime is a little tricky.
Those are very good examples of use in the personal as well as professional world. And there's also the challenge of you build an automated workflow around a particular tool, and then 2 weeks later, another tool leapfrogs the capabilities of that tool and are no longer kind of cutting edge. So it's a very dynamic landscape, as you said, Alexander. But good
Yeah,
example.
the advice for that though, and actually, it sounded like Andrew was doing something similar, but the advice is then not to use a platform where your data is locked away, right? Like all my stuff is in a folder of markdown files because all of the AMI, and I can use absolutely any foundation model with absolutely any coding harness, and they're all happy to go edit text and read these things and produce a great output. And so that means I can switch, I can beta test, I can A/B test, I can try all of the products. And so one minute I might be on Google Anti-Gravity doing something. The next minute I'm in Claude Code. The next minute I'm trying Claude Cowork. And there's actually different capabilities even within these platforms that you discover, different connectors available or not, different things. And so, also educate yourself on a little bit of the security problems here. That's a whole other talk probably that we could do a talk on. But yeah, it's worth trying to keep all your data in a way that lets you keep moving dynamically and rather than baking it into a SaaS platform.
Good advice. Like you said, we're all going on this journey together.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about a few real world examples from your experiences. So, Andrew, maybe we'll start with you. So you're using robotics and microfactories to build this climate resilient housing. I think this is a great example of these technologies being applied to real world infrastructure. Can you possibly pick a specific problem that you've had to solve, kind of how AI and robotics fit in, and maybe some of the product challenges that were unique to that domain?
Yeah, yeah. So it is kind of just the problem that Reframe is trying to tackle, right? Like the US is like a couple million homes short, and the construction market hasn't gotten meaningfully more productive in half a century. Like if I told you to build your car the way that Mercedes-Benz built a car in the 1920s, where a craftsman like put together every piece was sawing pieces of wood, like you'd think I was crazy, because they come off factories. That's how your house is built. Like productivity has actually gone down as the standards for the house have gone up. So the market needs scale. Like we need to produce at scale, but we also need to produce highly customized houses. There's a couple places that have tried like a very standardized product. Like this is the one house, like minor variation. You get a different paint color, and you just can't build enough to meet all the different housing types that are needed to in that couple of million gap. So how AI and robotics fit into that problem space? They power both the customization of the housing products that we're going to deliver and the manufacturing. Like the houses need to be manufactured. Manufacturing, you want to standardize tasks, shrink them to small, repeatable tasks. And once they're small, repeatable, well-defined, it's easy to have a robot do them. Sometimes robots have like dexterity limits that are just not worth solving, but you can still make small, repeatable tasks for a person to solve, and not eliminate trades, but kind of shift like the skill required. So shifting from master electricians to apprentice electricians, master plumbers to apprentice plumbers. There's a huge trade shortage too. It's not like you're getting rid of jobs. The houses are just not getting built for lack of these tradespeople. So that's the manufacturing part that lets you build more houses faster. The customization part, I spent a lot of time on that. Like houses get designed by architects. Architects work at a high level of granularity because they need to iterate with the customer, understand like where you want your bathroom relative to your bedroom. These sort of geometric but big level choices, as well as a bunch of aesthetic choices too. That is not a 3D model that defines where every nail goes and where every stud goes, which is what you need to feed into a robot. So I'm working on a software pipeline that lets an architect iterate with the customer the way that they normally do, but then really quickly, as possible, pumps out a factory producible plan. And there's tons of AI that we're building in there to like generate different aesthetic designs, figure out the customer intent better, select customers that are going to be better fits for us, where we're going to be more competitive, do our pricing, so we can understand that again, be more competitive with selecting customers. And then there's the huge layer of like physical AI and everything going on powering robotics too that we want to take advantage of. Robotics are expensive, and like we're trying to keep capital small. That's the micro and micro factory. So like we're using a lot more human labor right now, but still capturing the essence of the task so it can be repeated. And then I guess those unique challenges, I kind of hit on them, but one, the building code surface, the types of houses to build is just enormous. There's 30,000 jurisdictions in the US. Each of them defines building just different enough to make it very, very hard for us to meet those requirements. Two, the customer preferences vary a lot inside that code envelope too. So different customers care about different things. One really cares about windows, one cares about floors. Trying to understand those preferences and optimize for them while building a product cheap is really hard. AI is helping us there. And then last, manufacturing is really, really hard. That's bit of the LGO talking, but like as a system, right? Like if you have a production line and each is a step, like they're all a Gaussian process and you're trying to get something out at the end, and all those variations stack up, and it just becomes very, very difficult to optimize that system and make it run well. And ultimately, like the factory is the product for a house building company, and making manufacturing work well is hard.
And I assume the key part of your role as the product manager or someone else on the team is defining what are the constraints on that customization capability and kind of what the value is versus the cost of that complexity.
Absolutely.
Just to nerd out personally a little bit, I'm curious, what is the kind of end-to-end lead time from when the architect locks a design to when the unit is delivered to a site? I'm curious.
Yeah. So right now, we're company's pretty early stage. We've delivered a couple of units this year. We're expecting to deliver like 10x. So we're at a big inflection point. On the couple that we've delivered, we see like similar timeline, a little bit faster than the traditional site built model. But we've done that while building a system that automates and lets us customize at scale. So like we went slower to build the system to work better. And what we're looking at for these new this new tranche of homes we're delivering this year, we're looking at a couple months, right, compared to like year. And then I think the year after this, we'll probably be trying to get down to, couple weeks of design, couple weeks of build. And really interesting things start happening when you do that. If you're a direct to consumer, if you're buying an ADU for your home, like you're just happier, like you want your thing fast. If you're a developer and you're tying up a lot of capital into this project, you're carrying interest for half the time, and your interest costs go down half or more. That's huge. And you get your capital back when you sell it, so you can really accelerate the market you capture, how fast you deliver as a developer. So it's really competitive for a number of reasons. And every home we build is going to be carbon better for the climate, aiming for like carbon neutral, carbon zero. The only thing you can do if like you're building the houses fast enough to compete and they're cheap enough that people want to buy them, and then you can really make a difference in climate.
Very cool. Very interesting value proposition. Well, let's shift over to Alexander. So
Sure.
Can you share any specific examples, either from what you're working on today or from Samsara, kind of a particular PM challenge that arose for you?
Rose, what would be helpful? AI specifically, or just a
Yeah, something where the tensions between maybe the hardware, software, and AI capabilities of the product that you were building, or those roadmaps created a challenge specific for a product leader.
Sure. I mean, so something I was working on recently. I was helping an AI data company. So looking at this company's looking at ways to let LLMs better access structured data around databases and stuff. But as part of our working with a lead design partner there, we uncovered a sort of atoms problem instead of a bits problem, sort of a physical real world problem. And so our lead customer was, or one of our lead customers was one of the largest national deliverers of furniture in the country. And talking to them, one of their major problems, which we, of course, uncovered with our awesome AI data platform, was their delivery costs. And delivery costs, it turns out, were being driven by what are called in the industry missed deliveries, where customers are not home to receive the giant sofa you ordered. And what happens is something a little counterintuitive. They load all of the furniture for that delivery day with a team. They drive to the first house or business they're going to unload it at. And when they can't deliver because they can't get in touch with somebody, or they can't get through the gate, or something happens, the rest of the day, they've now got a massive sofa in the back of the truck that they've got to pull off and then get the one behind it and then put the old one back on. And it slows down every delivery throughout the rest of the day. And so they miss half the day's deliveries. And now they're half a day behind. And the next day, if they have another one or heaven forbid, you have two that don't get delivered, now you got to pull two things out every time. It just, trying to resort that truck when these missed deliveries is super painful for them. The way they try to solve that is with human labor. They try to have these drivers call ahead and make sure they'll be there about half an hour before, because their data says that's going to be it. But well, it turns out the drivers, I did ride-alongs, actually. You went, as you do as a PM, with your PM hat, you go and you actually you do ride-alongs with these drivers. Well, many of them don't speak English as a first language. Many of them are on the road driving when they're on the phone yelling at the customer, and the customer's telling them, hey, my gate code is 1289496, and they're, can't write it down. And so it's just like there were major problems with doing it there. So we built one of the so we applied AI. We built one of the largest outbound AI-powered voice agents that would actually make calls, use GPS positions, understand where the trucks are, make calls ahead of time to the customer, and with natural language now, because you can do that, be able to say, hey, you're getting your two sofas delivered. Do you have a gate code? Do you have anything else we should know? Be able to collect information from the driver, be able to take that and summarize it using LLMs as an SMS, text that to the driver. So every stop the driver gets to, they have the information, but also the customer's there much more often because they've been alerted ahead of time. If they can't make it there, there's contingency planning that happens before they drive all the way to the house, saves them some time. So again, the key here is that even when you get problems that don't seem like they would be software related, don't seem like they would be AI related, they're problems in whether people are home or not. A lot of the time, if you really dig in, you can find ways to apply modern technology now to go solve them, and they can be there. And we could talk a lot about, hey, what's the right way to deploy AI? How do you get systems that self-improve over time? And how do you get things that have, evals are super important. So there's lots of depth there, but that maybe one example of the type of problem you were asking about.
No, that's a great example, I think, of how AI can solve problems in the meatware layer in the real world. So
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
So sticking with you for a second, Alexander. Now
Yeah.
you've led product teams through massive growth,
Yep.
and I'm curious if you see any key organizational considerations, either around organizational design or what have you, when product teams own the full stack, software,
Yeah.
hardware, AI capabilities. Are there common mistakes you've seen companies make when scaling that kind of organization?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, early on, we actually only had a single PM team, and so all of the hardware PM stuff was done also by the mainly software PM team, and as a result, I spent a lot of my time having to dive in because when the hardware cycle times were much longer, of course, and then also the number of times we replaced a hardware product in market was much longer. Our sort of our an individual product would exist for at least 5 years at a customer, but then we might even ship that model for more than 5 is the idea, because you don't want to be, the less often we could do that, the better it would be for cost. And so what that meant is that almost every PM that was stepping up to then work on a hardware project that came up was doing that for the first time. They'd never worked on a hardware project before because the last cycle they hadn't done it yet. And so it was, even if you apply sort of that PM mindset, or they have a template as to like what they need to go figure out and they know how to gather requirements, it's just so hard when you don't get reps under your belt and having done this many, many times. People get better at stuff they get to practice. And so we did, after a few rounds of this, split out, the hardware PM group from the software PM group. And the trick then, even as you're doing that, is that while the hardware team will then get more reps under their belt, you still need someone to own the final customer experience. Like, what is it going to be like to when they get it? From the box that it comes in, to how they're going to onboard it, to how they're going to set it up, to the software installation experience and how it connects to the cloud and all that. You need that to be integrated. You can't just have that be thrown over the fence. And so there still needs to be some coordination there, but certainly it helps to have practice, understanding what it's going to mean for packaging, if the enclosure design is some way, or why making it smaller is more important, or why you really do need this waterproofing in these markets because it just turns out they wash it with high pressure water, like all these things that you learn through iteration on the hardware side that people don't learn if they don't have those reps under their belt. So it's really about trying to get that repeated learning so people get better over time.
That it is really interesting how you see every company kind of solve how are they going to organize the PM team a little bit differently. Is it going to be vertical technology related
Yep.
roles? Is it going to be horizontal across the entire customer stack, or some hybrid? So that's really interesting.
Yeah, and because the hardware was so, there wasn't the amount of hardware we're producing was much less than the amount of software, sort of in terms of humans that went into having to build it, like the engineering team sizes, and that it was different. So it was sort of by necessity organized such that the hardware PMs were having to stretch a lot more across industries and spans. On the software side, it was a little more segmented by product feature and market feature and that. But that's more of a function of team size. It's like when you're a very small startup, There's only one person maybe running all the product. Well, they're just, they're the person that's doing that. And then as you scale, you can specialize more and companies can get more divided. But yeah, at small scale, that's it.
Right. Really, really interesting. Andrew, so you're at a company that's at the other end of the scale in terms of their stage of growth as Samsara, perhaps, but I'm sure you are spending a lot of your time thinking about how do you build your team and the sort of capabilities that you need. I'm curious from your perspective, when you are looking to hire PMs, what has not changed in this world of AI in terms of the key skills and traits that you really value?
Yeah, I'll give you four things. I'm breaking the business school model of talking in threes. The first, you know, prioritization and frameworks. Like if you know how you want to make a decision and you can articulate it, then you can share that with other people on the team. You can convince them of your rationale, or you can make an AI like go do the research to compile data on each of those criteria and then give you a decision. So be able to articulate and use the frameworks and apply them. Second, along the lines of articulating frameworks is influence. Great PMs make you ask, how the hell did they do that? How did they manage to wrangle those cats? And that's soft skills. That is building and maintaining relationships. That's being able to repair strained ones that you inherit. That's fundamentally a human skill. Three, curiosity. You're going to touch the problem, go to the Gemba. It is so easy to sit in your chair at your desk and then think you understand something and have a wholly different understanding of what happens if you go and you touch it, if you go on that ride along, if you go and you walk to the factory floor, pick up a nail gun and build something yourself. And the last is humility. I think my favorite TED talk was that being right feels indistinguishable from being wrong. You really only find out after the fact. So product's hard. The decisions to make are hard. If you're somebody who assumes you're wrong and acts to prove otherwise, I think you end up being much more successful and finding better conclusions.
Alexander, any thoughts to add on the same question? Kind of what
I really loved Andrew's answer. I thought what I agreed with all of it. What especially resonated with me that I'd emphasize for everybody is the curiosity piece. I think because too and the humility piece, because I've been part of companies and serving customers that are not what were historically sexy industries and really desirable things, like trying to get. We hired a lot of PMs from the top tech companies in Silicon Valley. But what you see is there's people who are very proud, as they should be, of the fact that they worked at Google and Facebook and Apple and these top companies, but then also need to be able to come and talk to a person who spent 25 years managing truck drivers and understand their problems and do that in a way that isn't like talking down, because it shouldn't be. You learn a ton in 25 years. They know more about that than this PM ever will, but it can be, society, of course, values, the smart folks that get jobs at top tech companies in one way. And you can see that go sometimes to people's egos. And so I think the curiosity, the willingness to get out there in the real world, explore problems, do that. I think that's critical. So I agreed. Yeah, I loved Andrew's answer. I think it was right on. So
I love it. Could not agree more. Curiosity. I mean,
yeah.
To me personally, getting to know customers' businesses and kind of what makes them tick, and especially if they've been driving a truck for 30 years, that's really the fun part. Like that's the most fulfilling part of the PM.
It's so interesting to see alternative lives that you could have lived but did not, and get deep into that and having that hunger to kind of understand, like, okay, how would that life be? What makes that life easy? What makes that life hard? How can I, as a technologist, improve the hard parts for this person, generate a bunch of value and maybe build a business out of it, but at least make it a lot better? That's, I think, a lot of the fun for me of building these products and doing this type of stuff is diving into customer problems, making it better,
Totally. And personal anecdote too, like I came from Zoox working on AI, like cutting edge. And then, I'm on the factory floor a week ago following an electrician who's trying to fish a wire around some joists. And he does this in like 2 minutes. And I had a house project I did where it took me like 4 hours to do the same thing. And I just walked away like, wow, that is skill. That is learned skill embodied.
Well, the hour has flown by here. I could keep going on this honestly for another hour. But before we open it up to a few minutes of Q&A, because I do want to leave a few minutes, one last question for each of you, just kind of looking to the future. What advice would you give to product managers or aspiring product managers who want to work on meaningful, technically ambitious problems like the ones you are tackling today? Any advice? Andrew?
Yeah,
Or
go ahead, Andrew.
Alexander, you want to go first?
I'm happy to talk. Look, I think we're at a point now, which is kind of amazing, where you are empowered in a way we've never been before to just go build solutions and try stuff. And I think a lot of, I'm sure Andrew was the same way. Like as a kid, I was building stuff and as a teen, I was building stuff. And as a young adult, like I've never stopped wanting to build toy projects and stuff that helps your learning. And I think now that's easier than ever before. Learning is easier than ever before, thanks to all these AI tools, thanks to the fact that you can just go ask. And so, like, whereas before you often needed a CTO if you were somebody with an idea that like needed to make it real, now you can get so far by just trying. That's what I would say. Be curious, go find problems, go think about how you might solve them, try to solve them, fail, and learn from it, and just keep going. And I think, that's it. And don't worry about whether you're a PM or not a PM. Or I think one of the advantages historically was that because there was no school for PMs, you just had to get there by having a path, and the people who were maybe most curious or seemed to represent the customer fell into these jobs. As we train PMs, I'm sure that will improve things because it formalizes it, but also we want the same sort of like go try and do it and learn about stuff and understand problems and be able to both understand the business side and also how to get people fired up about the problem they're solving and the mission and that. I think both of those sides are really important. So
Love it. Andrew, any thoughts?
Yeah, be fired up. Like when you're looking for the job or the company, optimize for fun, optimize for your excitement. Not what other people say is fun, not what other people are excited about right now. Something that is going to like keep you deeply curious and energized, because like every product manager is a leader, whether you're leading other product managers or you're leading your product team. If you're not excited, if you're not energized, you're not going to do the discovery, and it's going to be transparent to them, and you're not going to be able to lead them. So find something fun. I get to pick up a nail gun once a week. Find your nail gun.
Nice. I love it. Well, we've got about 5 minutes left. I wanted to make sure we have a few minutes for questions. I've skimmed through the chat and I don't see any questions there, but I want to give the audience a chance to just raise your hand virtually, and anyone that has a question, fire away.
Greg, Dania just added one. Dania, do you want me to read it or you want to share?
I can try. I don't know if it's too loud here. I'm on a rooftop. Is this okay?
Oh, you sound great. I can hear you fine.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so awesome. Really excited about this topic about hardware and AI and PM. I have a similar passion. I'm curious about not just how the PM role is changing, but like how are you evolving as a leader? Are you getting closer to kind of a GM-like role where like anyone can prototype? Is it different now? Like, do you get to focus on the cool stuff of like, should we build this and why? Or is the perception like anyone can do PM and it's actually gotten harder to kind of justify your role in the team? So just curious, all three of you, on your perspectives.
I've got an opinion I can share quick if I'll jump in maybe first. I think as a leader, the value always has to come not from what you're doing, whether you're a GM or whether you're just coaching PM, has to come from the fact that you're enabling a team of many more people to be super effective. And so that's where you get your leverage and scale. You could maybe understand business better or be a GM or be have some skill, but that's still just one person doing one thing themselves. If you can just understand what are the limiting factors that keeps your team of 10 or 20 or 100 or 400 engineers or whatever it is, keeps them more productive, and you improve that by a small percentage, that's way more important than working double the hours yourself or doing something different yourself. That's maybe obvious, but maybe just helps focus on what the goal is. And maybe I'll pass it over to someone else so I don't monopolize.
Yeah, I'd say like, well, I actually had a very similar conversation with one of the engineers at work, which is like they hired a product manager instead of another engineer. Right? Like we could have used that headcount for another engineer. The bet is that like I can help make the engineering team reach better outputs. I can reduce the churn that like goes on, and there's always that kind of churn about what do you build, about the requirements, about when is it done, how to prioritize. I think what's changing now is that the features move so much faster. Engineers can act like multiple engineers could in the past. I think there's really a need for more product management. Like the faster you drive, the more important it is to steer well. And PMs are behind the wheel.
On that point, I'll put a little plug in. There's a podcast, Lenny's podcast, which I don't know if either of you follow this guy, but yeah, and he does an annual survey of product and engineering roles and just kind of queries all of the open roles for certain job titles across the tech industry. And I think a lot of folks may have expected that either engineers or PMs, that there are fewer needed as AI has ramped up in terms of capabilities, and it's the exact opposite. So you look over the last 2 to 3 years, and the number of PM recs is accelerating, I think exactly to Andrew's point, because you have an engineering team now that theoretically can build at a much higher velocity, and you need a larger team of PMs doing that discovery work, that customer engagement work to make sure that they're building the right thing with those capabilities.
Yeah. At the same time, I've also seen, great engineers now be able to spend more time leaning more into customer and understand that. It's interesting how they somehow, and actually there was a Lenny podcast that mentioned this as well, so maybe I'm stealing from there, but like the roles of designer and engineer and PM are kind of getting closer because now you can use these AI tools to supplement the skill that maybe you didn't have as strong before. So there was very few people that had all three of those. Whereas now, hey, if I don't really know how to code, but I'm great at design and PM, I can get the AI to do that. Or if I need a prototype, design, I can get a prototyping tool to build that for me. And so I think increasingly those are converging, and there's just hey, am I someone who can rally things and understand problems and deliver a solution? And we'll see that, I think, increase over the coming years.
Yep, the term full stack PM has entered the lexicon.
So, yeah. No, exactly.
We have 1 minute till we end. I know Matt has a question, so maybe we can hit it quickly. I do also just want to say thank you before we do conclude, because this has been amazing. I've learned so much, and it's just been really engaging. So thank you, and thank you to everyone who has attended. And Matt, maybe we can hit your question before we end. But
thank you, and I'll pair it with a question I just saw in chat. I'm interested in what advice you might offer people who are interested in getting into PM, either right out of school or from another career that they've had, but they're interested in pivoting into PM. What advice might you offer?
I can give you a 30-second about what to learn. Learn user research, anything you can about user research, jobs to be done strategy, workflow mapping, opportunity solution tree. That is discovery. Discovery is the one thing that is unique to product managers. If you figure out if you like that and you're good at it, you'll probably make a better decision and be able to articulate yourself better in the interviews to be a product manager.
And I'd say if you do that thing I said where you're building solutions for people, you're building stuff, you'll have stuff to talk about in an interview. You'll be able to take people through your thinking. You'll be able to talk about how you did that discovery, why you built something, the things that failed, the things that worked. Ultimately, people want people who can accomplish things. And so if you have a track record of doing that, even unprofessionally, even not in a professional way, but just like in your personal life or in stuff you're doing, that shows, and I think will be appealing to people who are looking for folks who can do the same at their company.